Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for allowing us to share our history with you this evening. We love any opportunity we can get to do this history presentation. It helps to keep our community alive and also give people who had no idea an opportunity to learn about our history and how we got here. And so I'd like to start by explaining the pictures that you see flashing are pictures of some of the original families that settled here on Rapp Road during the early 30s, right up until the 60s, actually. And the picture that you see right now is the Fantroy family. Um, uh, Mother Fantroy just passed away about 2 months ago or so. She was almost 100 years old, and she was just as perky, and I don't want to say alert because she did suffer uh, for memory, but she was very alert and just full of energy almost to the end. And she and her husband, Sammy Fantroy, raised 5 children in the house that you see in the middle of that picture. Their children all were educated in the Albany School District, and I know at least 2 of the daughters became school educators and did very well. The others did equally as well, although I can't speak to what their professions were. But I just wanted to give you an idea of some of these pictures that you'll see flashing as we go along with the presentation. They lived at the most southern end of Rapp Road, going toward Western Avenue. Their house set up on a hill. And up until very recently, the house looked exactly as you see it there. It has since been completely renovated. And I must say, though I'm not sure who purchased the home, they did a lovely job renovating it. So we're grateful for that because while it's not exactly the original house, they kept the structure and brought it up to today's codes and made it look very attractive in the neighborhood. So I'm grateful for whoever did the house over because it saved that house from being torn down. I'd like to start by saying the Rapp Road Historic District was a very faith-based community. And by that I mean their minister is the individual who was responsible for bringing them to the Pine Bush back in the early 30s. Uh, to be exact, Lewis W. Parson, as we knew him to be Elder Parson, brought, along with another man by the name of William Tolliver, 14 acres of land in the Pine Bush from a farmer by the name of Charles Smith. Charles Smith sold them the land for $400, and I have a copy of the original bill of sales for that $400. So it's something that I can bear proof that we did purchase the land. That is, the Elder Parson and Tolliver purchased the land from Charles Smith. We are very proud of the fact that we were able to purchase this land because it greatly resembled the land that they left behind in Shabuta, Mississippi back in the early 30s. And I believe the reason they wanted to purchase the land was because it would make the individuals that were they were parceling the land to feel more in touch with their roots that they had left behind. Uh, Lewis was a very innovative visionary. He was a very young man when he came to Albany, New York. He and his wife Frances came to Albany in 1927. They were from, as I said, Shabuta, Mississippi. He was a traveling uh, minister, but settled in the city of, or the town, I should say, of Shabuta. And I have to say very candidly, if you blinked your eye, you missed Shabuta, Mississippi. So it indeed was not a city, but rather a little small town. Mostly sharecroppers and tenant farmers lived there. Most of them were related to each other in one way or another, either through bloodline or through marriage. So everybody was connected somehow. What I love about this history is the fact that when things got really, really tough for Blacks in Shabuta, uh, they wanted to figure out how they could get themselves in a better position for the sake of their families. And for example, during this time, Jim Crow was very, very big. You had separate entrances for Blacks, and there were some very stringent laws about what Blacks could do versus what whites could do. There was also the situation of education. The children that went to school, those that were able to go to school, they had a certain period of time that they were afforded to go to school because the children worked right along with the parents to do the crops in the early spring and then harvest at the end of the summer. So when school was in, sometimes the children weren't always able to go to school. However, when they were able to go to school, they would have to walk right past the school that was for the built for the white children in order to get to their one-room school house, which didn't offer them a lot of resources. They would get the hand-me-down books and materials from the schools that the white children went to, and sometimes there were pages missing out of a book, or there was, it was just not very conducive conditions for them as far as resources were. However, they did get a good education as far as they were able to go. I know that my grandmother was had a sixth grade education, but you couldn't touch her when it came to math. She was very good with numbers. And so she was one that the teacher would have help her, assist her with the students in the classroom that they shared. And as I said, it was a one-room schoolhouse. So you would have all different grade levels under one roof. And I'm sure it must have been very tricky based on what I know about homeschooling today. I don't think I could have done it, but somehow they managed to do it. The other thing that was an issue for them was the crop industry was drying up. There was the boll weevil uh, destruction, and there were the cotton field was getting taken over by machinery, and they started having difficulty farming the way they had once farmed. So they had to go outside of Shibuda to look for other areas to work. One of those areas was Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And a lot of the families went to Hattiesburg for work. The thing that I wanted to backtrack and say is when Lewis realized that things were not going well in Shibuda, he had had an accident on the railroad, and he acquired quite a good sum of money as a result of the injury he sustained. And knowing it was not wise for a young Black man to have a lot of money in Shibuda, Mississippi, he felt it was in him and his wife's best interest to move north. And so because of the conditions, the drying up of the farming industry, the lack of education for the children, all those variables caused him to look north. When he decided to move north, he had a sister living in Cleveland, Ohio, and his sister invited them to come and stay with her. When they arrived there, Elder Parson didn't feel it was a good fit for him and his wife. So he told her, "Come on, Frances, we're going to head east." Hence, they started driving east and they ended up coming to Albany, New York. This was in 1927. And when they arrived in Albany, there was a revival going on in one of the local Baptist churches. It was called Union Missionary Baptist Church, which still exists on Morton Avenue in the south end of Albany. At this meeting, this revival, he met three young women who were prayer warriors, and they teamed up with him and started a prayer circle. As a result of that prayer circle, they decided they would go ahead and start a small church. They had a storefront church in the south end of Albany, and that church moved around to various locations until they finally settled at 79 Hamilton Street. And that was the name of the church, 79 Hamilton Street, First Church of God in Christ. They were a Pentecostal church, and everything was based around the church. Hence, once Lewis and William Tolliver bought the properties, they sold parcels only to individuals that attended their church. And this is where the community starts to take form. Because it looked so much, as I said, like the land they had left behind, it almost seemed like they were replicating where they came from. And when they got there, they found that the land had to be cleared. There were it was all pine trees and scrub oaks, and this is what they had to contend with. There was one road that brought you into the area where they decided to settle. It was Rapp Road. And I'm not sure how Rapp Road acquired its name. I was told that. Sorry about that. There was a farmer by the name of Rapp, and I believe that's where the name Rapp Road came from. Once we came to the area, there was a matter of trying to work the land. Once it was cleared, it had to gardening and raising livestock is what they knew. So this is what they started doing. And at one point, when I was a little girl, if you came down through Rapp Road, which was nothing more than a little lane, it's a thoroughfare today, but back then it was nothing more than a little lane, and it went from Western Avenue Turnpike, and it carried all the way across and through to Central Avenue in Colony. Once you crossed over the railroad tracks where the road turns into Lincoln Avenue, this is how far Rapp Road traveled at one point. Where, excuse me, where the road, there were other little inlet roads, but like I said, they were called either wagon trails or they were just little dirt lanes. And one of those dirt lanes would carry you across to 6 Mile Waterwork, if you know where that is off of Fuller Road. So there weren't very many ways to access Rapp Road. So not many people knew about Rapp Road other than those that lived back over in these barren pine woods. And so what ends up happening is slowly individuals started buying the properties. And when it was all said and done, there were 23 families that purchased and cleared land and eventually built homes. The homes that were built sometime in the 40s. I believe the earliest home was built in the early 40s, around 1940, maybe 41, somewhere around there. But in any event, they started building their homes. Now, there were no mortgages to be had at this time because banks were not lending to Blacks. So we had to figure out how to build homes for the families so that they could live here while they worked their gardens and raised their livestock. When they got to the point where they were ready to build homes, they would team together. All the other neighbors would get together, and they would dig foundations, usually with a horse and a makeshift, if you will. What do you call it? Backhoe. They used a horse and a big shovel to dig the foundation, and then they would take and lay brick, not brick, but rather the cinder block foundations. And it was no easy feat, but because they were farmers and they were very resourceful, they knew how to lay these foundations and build them with the hopes of eventually moving their families into these homes. And sometimes it took years because in the case of my grandparents, Alfred and Leola Woodard, it took them 5 years to complete their home. They did not move into the home, their final home, right away. They started in 1944 and they completed the home in 1949. And what ends up happening is my grandmother, being the Renaissance woman she was, and I'll explain why I call her a Renaissance woman in a bit, but she felt that it was too costly and she didn't want to go back and forth from the south end of Albany to Rapp Road to tend to their gardens, to tend to their livestock. So while my grandfather started building what would become their final home, she built a little, what they call, shotgun house. The shotgun house was really nothing more than a building with a front entrance that went all the way to the back of the house, with a center hallway with rooms off of each side of that hallway. And he was not too interested in what she was doing, because he was going to build what they referred to as the big house. But once he saw the progress she was making with the little house, or the shotgun house, he stopped what he was doing long enough to help her complete the shotgun house, so that they could move their family to Rapp Road and therefore not have to pay rent downtown in the south end of Albany. Uh, the land out here was referred to as the Holy Land, or the Promised Land, because it was a newfound hope for the people that left Shibuda and surrounding areas to come north and settle here. It was during the time of the Great Migration, and hence this is how we get involved as part of the Great Migration, because it was during this period that we were moving north to various areas of the states, the United States. Some moved to Buffalo, some moved to Detroit, some moved to California. We happened to move to Albany, New York. And the thing that I love about our history is that no matter what obstacles they might come up against, they were determined to find a way to overcome them and get their community established so that it was habitable and comfortable. The children went to the Albany School District, and they went to what is now known as Eagle Point. Back then, it was simply known as School 27. And all of the children that lived in this community went to School 27. They had transportation to get the children to and fro from school, that is, the school district did. But they would not bring the school bus down in to Rapp Road, because the road was so narrow and there were nowhere for it to turn around. So the children would have to walk out from Rapp Road near not Pine, but Springsteen Road to Western Avenue in order for the school bus to meet them there. Well, that was fine in the summertime when the weather was conducive, but when the weather was not conducive, the children would have to be brought out to the end of the road so that they could get the school bus. This is where the church, being the nucleus of this community, comes into play, because what they did was they raised enough monies so that they could buy a school bus that would bring the children to and from school. In order to do this, because the road was so narrow, they had to figure out a way to widen the road enough at Springsteen Road so that they would have a spot to turn around and come back down Rapp Road to Western Avenue. It was not an easy feat, but like I said, they were very resourceful people. And so the neighbors all got together, and with the help of my grandparents and some of the other neighbors, they widened the road right at the corner of Springsteen and Rapp Road so that the bus had a way to turn around. Okay, so now you have the road that's accessible. but who's going to drive the school bus? And this is where the Renaissance woman comes into play, because my grandmother volunteered to drive the children to and fro to school on that school bus. And this is an example of the kind of determination that they had. They didn't believe in roadblocks. They wanted to their children to be able to have the wherewithal to get on the school bus and get to school safely. And this is one example of the way in which they did it. The other thing that I am very proud to say is whenever there was a need, everyone came together to help whoever was in need. There were no boundaries as far there were parcels of land, but there were no boundaries. And for example, there was a driveway down at lower end of Rapp Road that was shared by two families because the one family did not have enough room to build a driveway on their rightful side of the house. So it was no big deal for them to share a driveway. Okay, I don't think you would see that an awful lot today. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not likely. This is the type of living they did. The reason we shut Rapp Road and Springsteen Road down once a year since 1957 is to let the city of Albany know that property lines run right straight through the middle of Springsteen Road. Property lines also run through the middle of Rapp Road. So technically, these roads are private owned roads. And we pay taxes to the city of Albany, and the city of Albany has used these roads forever. And it's never posed a problem until recently. And I'm not going to get into that too much. I'd rather Stephanie address that. But what I would like you to know is that every little house that you see along this road has a significant story to it in terms of the people that lived there and how they got there. And most of the children, once they grew up and moved away, they didn't tend to want to return to Rapp Road. I'm not sure why that was, but I know when I moved away as a little girl, for me, coming back to Rapp Road was a real treat. And many years later, I was able to move back to Rapp Road. This is my 26th year living on Rapp Road, next door to my grandparents' home. And I loved Rapp Road as a little girl, and I still love Rapp Road because we had such a rich history. And to celebrate that rich history, every year on the third week of August, the third weekend of August, we have a big family reunion. And the reunion was started when a cousin who had migrated from Shibuya to Buffalo had come for a visit. And when he came for the visit and was preparing to leave to go back to Buffalo, he just the women and men of the community decided to have a cookout, and they slaughtered a couple of hogs, and the women made salads and baked goods and vegetables, and they had a big send-off for this cousin that had come to Albany, New York from Buffalo. And since 1957, this has been a tradition of the Rapp Road community. And we have people come from far and near to attend this cookout. And if you were to look right at the corner of Rapp and Springsteen Road, you'll see a little low white building that we refer to as the cookhouse or the smokehouse. That building was built to cook the pig that were slaughtered for this event. And we kept the tradition going since 1957 up until recently because of COVID, of course. And everybody was so heartbroken because this was the first time we had to break with tradition and not do a cookout. However, thank God for modern technology. People shared photos and stories of their remembrances of coming to family reunions and stories about them visiting Rapp Road when they were young, so that in a sense we still were able to have a virtual family reunion, though we were not able to congregate on Rapp Road. But God willing, we will do it again next year, and hopefully bigger and better. And on that note, I think I'd like to turn this over to Stephanie and let Stephanie talk to you a little bit more about Rapp Road and where things have evolved to since the Historic Association has been actively working on preserving and restoring the community. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. Beverly has given you a presentation of Rapp Road and how we began. And I just want to put things into a little bit a different perspective that the Great Migration started in 1910 and it went through until 1970. Just to give you an idea of how people of color, African Americans, were moving throughout the United States, that between 1910 and 1940, 1.6 million Southern African Americans moved north. And of the 1.6 million, 372,000 came to New York State. And this was, they came by all different methods. Some took the train, some by cars, and they continued to move, on their way up to New York and on to California and Chicago. During the time of 1940 and 1970, they considered it to be in the second wave of the Great Migration, and that took on about 5 million African Americans left the South to move to the North. And of that number, 917 wound up in New York State. Through history, we find that most African Americans moved to bigger cities like California, Chicago, and New York City. However, to get to those cities, it was very easy. They had some mode of transportation, whether a bus station or a train station at the time. We've been told that for the number of people who moved to Albany, it was a quite difficult method to get to Albany because there wasn't a major, a major hub for transportation. But people came, and they came with their families, and some came with no more than a new bride and a quarter in their pocket. But they knew that what Reverend Parsons had set up for them was much better than what they had experienced in the South. Most importantly, what they had experienced in Shibuya, Mississippi, one of the last cities, or I think they're a small city that had the last lynching in the United States. They were also part of the last group. People who lived in Shibuya, Mississippi were part of the last people who had experienced the opportunity to vote or not vote. They had not been voting and all through the South, African Americans were voting. So when people came to Albany, they were driven, as Beverly indicated, that they wanted to, be a part of a community of faith, and they wanted to raise their children where they could get educated, which was the most important part. So as the district began to become more established, we are on both the national and we are on the state registry. The Rapp Road Historical Association, our mission is to preserve the district as much as possible. We work with families who are interested in keeping their homes on Rapp Road. We work with the City of Albany, as well as the Historic Albany Foundation, to make sure that we are abreast to any issues or concerns out on Rapp Road. Historical Foundation is notified by the city for any demolition projects, and anytime there is one recommended, we get notified, and we're able to go to sit down to the city hall and express the need to keep our homes intact. We had an opportunity to work with the Daughters of Sarah, the association, when they purchased, I do believe it was 59 Rapp Road. That was Wilborn's house. They're the couple one of the couples on the slide. That's Wilborn and his wife in their house. And that was on the list of demolition by Daughters of Sarah. And the association worked with them to help them understand the significance of the home. And they were able to have that home sold, and a buyer came in, they renovated the home, and now it remains on Rapp Road. So we do a lot to just make sure we try to preserve the homes on Rapp Road. The association also does fundraising. We do this in the event we ever have to hire a lawyer or a surveyor or anyone that we need to either help develop a grant or provide some level of expertise that we don't have to help us continue our efforts in preserving the district. We also provide presentations like we are doing today. So I too, on behalf of the board, want to thank you all for inviting us to come and speak about Rapp Road. We have done presentations with colleges and universities in the Capital District. We have collaborated with their students who need internships related to history. We had one young lady whose last name happened to be Rapp, spelled exactly the way we spell Rapp Road, and she helped us develop our website. We work with professors at RPI. We had a young man come and help us develop an augmented reality software. It was an app that we were able to bring to life some of our pictures that you see scrolling on the screen with actual words being spoken by the owners of the homes. We have done, we've also had an opportunity to work with SUNY Albany several times on different presentations that they have in their classrooms regarding history and globalization and the movement of people within the United States and people who move outside the United States and what they do in order to preserve their culture and their way of life. So we do a lot. Our main concern right now, as it is with the commission and also the members of the Friends of Pine Bush, is the development that is going on Rapp Road, both for the apartment complex and the Costco. So we are working feverishly with the City of Albany, the Town of Guilderland, and the Pyramid Model Corporation as a way to preserve our community so that it could live on for hopefully ever and ever. We have had the opportunity to sit down with the mayor, as well as with Pat Sheehy and Honorable Breslin and Honorable Sheehy. And we want to make sure that they understand that it's bigger than just the city of Albany in terms of preserving African American historical sites. African American historical sites represent only 2% of the national sites that have been designated. We are unique because of the fact that when African Americans migrated from the South, they mostly migrated to where there was an actual dwelling, which meant they migrated where there was an apartment building or there was other houses. And what makes Rapp Road unique, there was no houses, there were no dwellings, there were no apartments. It was just land that they had purchased. And as Beverly described, they had to build their own property, and their own houses on their own property. What makes Rapp Road even more unique is the fact that the residents of those homes are still here in the city of Albany. They are descendants of the people and the families who have actually built those homes. And it's important for the city and everyone else to recognize that even though we may go to other places like Harlem or the South Side of Chicago or places in LA, one of the things that are in California, one of the things people need to recognize is that they walked into a residence where the people on Rapp Road did not. And we are so proud that we are able to maintain this district. And, you know, every time a little something happens, you know, everybody gets on the phone, just like I'm sure they did back in the 1940s. You know, do you know this happened? Do you know that happened? Are you seeing this? Or did you hear about that? And that's what's unique, because even in today's society, people don't do that as much, and they don't look out for their neighbors. So with that being said, I just want to once again thank you all for inviting both me and Beverly to come and speak to you all about this little community located in neighbors with all of you called Rapp Road Historical District.
Stephanie, that's great. Bev, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We have some questions lined up, and I actually have some more questions. So we'll go to the chat room right now and just read them off. Is there a shotgun house that's still standing? Do you know?
Yes. Yes, there is. My grandparents' house next door, if you were to go into the front part of their house, you can look down the hallway and you will see the entrance to the back door.
Cool. Very cool.
And off of those rooms are some bedrooms. I think there's three bedrooms. There was a living room and dining room, and the kitchen and the bathroom that were off that center hallway. I remember as a child, there being a big square grate in the center of that floor, and because they used wood to heat the home. And I can remember us as children huddled around that grate and sitting at my grandfather's feet while he told us all kinds of wonderful stories, and sometimes scaring us so much about ghosts that he had seen when he was a young boy in the South. And we would be so scared, we didn't want to move from his feet because he had us so engrossed in the stories he would tell us. So yeah, there is a shotgun home that I can think of right off the bat, which happens to be my originally belonged to my grandparents.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And from Darwin, were the sandy pine bush soils good for growing vegetables and other crops to support a family or beyond, or?
You know, yes, because as I said, they were very innovative and resourceful. And I just learned recently there was sand in some parts of Mississippi and Shibuda. And what they did was they took, remember I said when they wanted to widen the road and make it so the school bus could turn around, they did the same for irrigating their crops. They rigged up an irrigation uh, uh, irrigation, what is the word I'm looking for? Uh,
like a canal or something like that,
Not a
or
canal. No, it was like they'd have horses hooked up to this long pipe, and the water somehow they rigged it so that the water would irrigate the crops, because I can remember seeing a field of corn on one side of the road. Do you know where the um, condos are at 45 Rapp Road when you come down through Gip Road?
mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that land belonged to the elder and his wife, and they sold, the niece inherited that property, and she did not care to do anything with the property, so she sold it to a developer. Hence, that's how the condos got there. But prior to the condo being there, that used to be nothing but fields of corn. I can remember as a child. Um, we had all kinds of crops on either side of the road, up and down Rapp Road, where they grew corn, they grew peas, they grew okra, they grew green beans, collard greens, anything that you can imagine. There was one thing that they said that they had a hard time growing, and that was sweet potatoes. For some reason, they could not grow sweet potatoes in the soil up here. But they made their own irrigation contraption, is what I was looking for, so that they could water their gardens and keep their gardens thriving. And I can remember Stephanie and I often laugh, and we say we are the new generation for the and descendants of the original settlers here, because her grandmother and my grandmother were first cousins, and they did a lot of harvesting and canning of the crops that they would grow during the season. And at the end of the summer, they would go and put up a lot of the vegetables and fruits that they had grown during the growing season. And so, of course, Stephanie and I don't do a lot of canning. We don't do a lot of crop growing, but we like to think that we're carrying on by keeping their legacy alive, with the way they lived life. On a hot August day, you could walk into my grandmother's kitchen, and it would be the windows would be all steamed up, and I don't know how they were able to do it, but they did it. And they had in the wintertime, we had bread and butter, pickles, we had preserves, fruit preserves. We had all kinds of goodies that were harvested from the crops from the summer before. So it was a very good life that we lived here, and we did not realize as children what a rich history we were living. But we have a real appreciation for it now.
Nice, nice. Another quick question from Darwin. What did the New York State and National Historical District designations do and mean to recognize and preserve the Rapp Road community? Did that sort of give you more leverage, like you said, in applying for grants, or working with the cities. How did that help?
It's helped quite a bit because it's made people realize the importance and the significance of our history as being part of the Great Migration. And it's also made made us realize that, you know, what we just thought of as living in the promised land on Rapp Road, it's made us realize just how significant what they did has meant for us in terms of keeping our heritage and our legacy intact. So it has helped quite a bit. And right now we're in the process of working on trying to get our community placed in the historical land, what is it, the HALS, the historical, I can never get the acronym right, but it's the historical landscape. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's the historical American Landscape Survey of the National Park Services, which is part of the U.S. Department of Interior in Washington, D.C., which would put us on the list in the the Congress, Library of Congress. And we're working on preparing an application for that as we speak. Our aim, our mission is to document as much as we can places that will help to recognize and keep our history alive. And that's why we do fundraising. Though we haven't done much this year, obviously, or last year, I should say, because of COVID. But we're trying to preserve our community and keep the rich history alive. And so these are ways in which we have been able to do it through the state, through the National Historic Register, and now through the HALS, hopefully, so that we can say, yes, we were here. I often think about Central Park in New York City and how that once was an African-American community. And there's nothing to let you know that it even ever existed. We have just a remnant of what once was here, because if you look on the other side of Washington Avenue Extension, where Walmart and Home Depot and some of those other strip mall stores are, they too were once part of the historic Rapp Road district. In 1971, when the state decided to put the highway in out here, that literally cut our community in half, so that any homes that were on the opposite side of that road were lost to eminent domain. There was one house that was spared, and because they were given the option to either sell it to the state or to have it moved forward closer to the rest of the community. And the one family opted to move their home closer to Rapp Road. Unfortunately, it was the first house that was built here. It was number 8 Rapp Road, and it was sold to a gentleman in New York City. And he didn't realize, I don't believe, that I wasn't involved with the Historic Association at the time, but he didn't realize at the time the history of the home. And I looked up one morning very early, and the house was being dismantled. And all I could do was just stand and look in the window and cry. Because as a child, I remembered going to that house. It was a home for the family, but it also served as a prayer meeting house for the women in the community that couldn't get to church to go to prayer during the midday. So it's, you know, we've lost a lot of what once was here, but we still have this very small remnant, and we're trying with everything we have to hold on to it.
Well, no, and actually that leads to another question. How many homes or houses still remain of the original community? Do you know?
Of the homes that are still here, there are 14. Okay. There are 4 homes that are in very bad need of repair. And I'm even afraid that some of them may not be salvageable of the 4. But the rest have either been renovated or they're still in pretty good shape. So I would say there's about 10 houses that are in good form, and the other 4 are, you know, in need of repair.
Wow, okay.
Mhm.
Of how many? Do you think how big, how many houses were in the full community before all the
There
development
were
out there?
23 families that lived in the community.
Wow.
Mhm.
And actually, so I'll interject one of my questions at this point, because I would even aim even higher than your landscape, the house thing, and go to
Mhm.
UNESCO. Because if this is a unique, as Stephanie said, you know, if this is something that grew, that was so unique that people didn't move into houses until they came here, that's
Mhm.
something that you need to, you know, you need as much help as you can to save it. And that's what UNESCO does. You know, it saves those
Mhm.
little things that are representative,
Mhm.
especially if there are any unique architectural elements that came out
Mhm.
of the building, of the
Mhm.
houses, the styles.
Mhm. Mhm. Well,
But
we have a gentleman by the name of Richard Powell, who has been very helpful and helping us with you know creating a document to send to the U.S. Interior Department. Um, and we also have Jennifer Lamack, Dr. Jennifer Lamack, who wrote the book on the history of the Rapp Road Community. And so we're steadily forging ahead, pulling together the information we need to try to. It's still in its draft stages, but we're constantly working on it, pulling as much information together as we can.
that's
Uh,
great.
but anybody that may have some insight, I know I've been in contact with John Bonafide, who works for the Parks and Recreation and Historic Preservation for the state. And he was very instrumental in helping us get placed on the state and national historic register back in 2002 and 2003.
That's wonderful. That's good to
Mm-hmm.
have those strong allies. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
Um,
but we never refuse help.
no, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, and Kat had a question. When Stephanie, you mentioned that you're in talks with the city and the mayor regarding the apartment complex and the Costco development. Does it sound like the city's responsive, that businesses will honor what you're doing there, what the Historical Society's concerns and requests are?
Well, I think from the board's perspective, we are getting a lot of support from the Pyramid folks. I think they recognize the significance of the Rapp Road Community Center, the Rapp Road Historical District. I think because they have been in contact with us for over the years when Emma had to, work with them on the reconstruction of basically the traffic mitigation that we have currently right now is because of the work that Emma did with the Pyramid company to basically say, okay, we know this cross gates is coming, and all the work they did to really kind of like stop coming through and just purchasing, land and thinking that, when, just to back up a little bit, when the Pyramid Model Corporation came to start the development of cross gates, they were told that the people who lived on Rapp Road did not own their property, that the property was actually owned by the city of Albany. And so when that statement was made, they felt it was, good to go. They were going to pay the city, get the land, and do whatever development they wanted to. The original development for Rapp Road, for cross gates, was not to just have a mall, it was to have a mall and a hotel connected. So when Pyramid started doing their research, they actually went to, I think it was, I can't think of the name of the surveying company. They went and they started surveying people's land. They had no idea that this developer was coming to build this mall until people started seeing strangers walking on their land. And then that's when there was a conundrum, and Emma got involved with the city and basically had to educate them. They tried to say people didn't have deeds. The deeds were lost. They couldn't find the deeds in the clerk's office. Well, lo and behold, they all had their own deeds, and they started producing their own deeds. And then everything just came to a halt. But in the meantime, Pyramid had went through the whole community and started buying up these bits of property. So I think, from my perspective, I think because of the long-lasting intersection between Pyramid and Rapp Road, we seem to get more sympathy in terms of what needs to happen in order to mitigate the traffic that is going to happen. I think we get more help from the town of Guilderland, from what I've seen as we've been going through this process for, I think, we might be coming on 2 years, that they too recognize that this is a gem, that there needs to be some type of support so that the traffic isn't so heavy coming through the historical district. So that's where we are right now. They've had, I don't know, I think maybe on our 10th or 12th, people have been watching and understanding the process. I'm not new to government at all, but I am new to this part of government. I've never done anything environmental. Most of my work is all in the human services, child welfare, the OMH, the aging, like all that. So I'm learning as we go along, but at least they've been receptive to recommendations we've had. They've shared, what a mitigation will look like, from their perspective. So the amount of communication is very open right now with Pyramid and the town of Guilderland.
Well, that's good to hear. That's definitely something, at least. So.
Yeah.
But keep up the good fight. Just a couple more questions. Thank you guys so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And obviously, you've got some real fans here. So, going back to the schools. When did Rapp Road area become part of the city of Albany? Do you know? And what schools did the kids attend beyond 27 or Eagle Point, as you said?
Okay. The children that lived in the community, they were some of them were born here. I know my Aunt Emma, who grew up, she was born in the community, so she started school probably around 1949. She had older siblings, so I would say, you'd have to go back to most of the families didn't actually move out here, though they were in Albany until the early 40s. I want to say maybe as far back as 1942.
Okay.
They may have started living in the community, but they started school in the Albany School District once they arrived in Albany, and that was probably around 1933. They started out going to school in the South End in the elementary school. Uh, I believe it was School One. They attended in the South End of Albany. And then they went to middle school at either Hackett Middle School or the Philip Livingston Middle School.
Mhm.
And from there, they would go to Albany High School.
Okay.
So they went from, grade school right straight up through high school in the Albany School District. And I say 1933 because I believe that's when I saw the documentation of people arriving um, from Shibuya to Albany, New York.
Very cool.
And Rapp Road probably was established probably around that same time frame that Beverly was indicating.
1930.
That
1930, they got the deed. They had the deed for the property for the first 14 acres. 3 years later, and they bought another 14 acres. So in total, there were 28 acres of land purchased from Charles Smith, who was the farmer that sold them the property. And one important element that I did not mention, and I think it's very important, just to again show you how resourceful and how they worked together, was during the early 70s when, or even before that, when urban renewal came to the south end of Albany, and they were building the South Mall and the arterials. They, as I said, they meaning the community, had their church in the lower south end of Albany at 79 Hamilton Street. I think I mentioned that to you. Well, once urban renewal came through there, they were displaced, which meant they had to find a new home for their church. And again, there weren't very many people willing to give them a mortgage. So they had to try to figure out, where are we going to be able to find someone willing to give us a mortgage? Well, as it turned out, they ended up finding a lender in Syracuse, New York. And in order for them to secure the mortgage, they had to, a couple of the elders put up their homes for collateral, as well as other members of the church donating monies that they had been saving to build their homes. They took the monies and pooled all their resources, and they bought what was formerly known as Beth Emeth Synagogue on the corner of J, Lancaster, and South Swan Street. And that's where they settled, and still to this day are there. And it's also considered a National Historic Landmark. It's now called Wilborn Temple. And most of the families that still live here attend Wilborn Temple.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very cool. Okay, one last question. In his book, Eric Schlimmer mentions that Arthur Rapp had a farm stand nearby that operated from 1912 until 1950. Do you know, did the community have a relationship with him or the farm stand?
The only ones that I know of, and this is, I was so young that I would have not known. I do have a cousin that may be able to answer that question. She's not available this evening. She had a prior commitment. But there was the Gip Pig Farm down at the lower end of the road where the project that Crossgate is looking to build once was. And then there was a chicken farm that was on the other side of the road where Rapp Road wrapped around going towards Lincoln Avenue, headed to Central Avenue.
Okay.
Those are the only two that I'm familiar with. Now, that's not to say that there were not interaction with this rap that you're referencing, but I don't have any documentation
Right.
that would, tell me that.
No, definitely.
Be curious to find out, though.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, that's the wonderful thing about this. This is clearly living history. And as you gather more documentation and the anecdotal information, you're just, coloring in all those different pieces, which is fantastic.
It's like piecing together a quilt.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Bev, Stephanie, for your time tonight. This has been absolutely fascinating. And I apologize for going long, but I didn't want to close off any questions. So thank you again for sharing your personal stories and your progress and what's going on today. So yes, definitely applause to everyone. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate your interest.
And,
definitely.
And Beverly and Stephanie, I think I speak for the board that, we welcome you and your neighbors and to any friends' activities that might be of interest to you. We'd like to maintain a close relationship.
Yes, I met Mike Venuti many years ago, and I met Mike through a grant that the Friends group offered to have some oral histories done of people that lived in the community that were first generation. And that was my first linking up with the Friends organization. And they've remained near and dear to my heart ever since. So we love partnering with organizations such as the Friends. At one point, I actually wanted to be a part of, but I dealt with some health issues that didn't permit me to give 100%. So because I couldn't give 100%, I ended up resigning. But certainly anytime we can, lend support in any way, we're always willing to.
Thank you so much.
It's been a great evening. Thank you so much.
So stay tuned. We'll have announcements for next month's program soon.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to thank my dear friend, Richard Naylor. Richard, I think he probably worked as hard making sure this thing came off without a hitch as anyone that I know. We had a few glitches even as early as today, but with persistence and determination, Richard, you pulled it off. So thank you. And that goes for Jody Nash as well.
Yes. We enjoyed working with you. That's for sure.
Mhm. Well, it was a pleasure, and like I said, anytime the association can be of assistance, we're just a phone call or a text or an email away.
Okay.
Thank you, Bev. Thank
All
you,
right.
Stephanie.
You all have a good night.
Welcome. Good night.
So
Okay.
much.
Thanks.